Hey guys, in today's video, I'm going to analyze the Mensik serve. And right now, I would put Mensik and Pericard as the two best servers in the world. So Jakub Mensik serves with a lag. What that means is when the toss arm leads the way and the racket arm comes up afterwards. That's a lag serve. The vast majority of players on both the ATP and the WTA Tour serve with a lag. Now, within the lag, there's going to be many different rhythms. There's going to be many different ways the racket goes up. And there are also going to be different toss techniques. And Jakub Mensik has some interesting characteristics. So first of all, when he was in juniors, he used to serve differently. He has improved his serve a lot. So even back then, he served with a lag. But the way he timed the back foot pulling up to the front foot was way later. So he would toss the ball first, lag the racket behind, then go up with the racket. And somewhere around here, he would start pulling that back foot up to the front foot. He also had a very straight arm position around the trophy face. Jakub Mensik doesn't do that anymore.
Once Mensik transitioned to the ATP Tour, he changed the timing of his back foot pulling up. So now he would pull that back foot up as that racket was going up towards the trophy face. However, he still had somewhat of a straight arm as the racket was going up towards the trophy phase. In 2024, after the Miami tournament, Mensik took some time off to work on his serve and actually skipped some clay court tournaments to be able to do that. And he made several changes. First of all, he doesn't put his right foot, once it settles next to the front foot, so much on the outside. It's still slightly on the outside, but to a lesser degree. And more importantly, as the racket is going up into the trophy phase, Mensik's arm is much closer to his body.
Now, when it comes to the way he takes the racket up from the lag, he has one of the cleanest techniques on tour. And it is actually a technique that I use for some of my students that have problems when they take their racket back and up. So here's what Mensik will do. He will lag the racket behind, and the racket will go up diagonally with the tip of the racket positioned towards the corner of the back fence. And then from here, the racket will go straight up towards the trophy. What this naturally results in is, first of all, the strings being more orientated towards the other side of the court. And it also results in the racket going back on edge. So the movement goes in the following way. The racket lags behind, tip of the racket goes towards the corner of the back fence, the arm starts to bend, and now the racket goes on edge into the racket drop. Now, there are many different styles of take-ups on the serve, and there are two different styles of racket drops. There's the open-faced racket drop like Roger Federer or Pete Sampras, and there's the on-edge racket drop like, for example, John Isner. Both of these are correct racket drops. The open-faced racket drop should not be confused with a waiter serve. Now you're probably thinking, Nick, is this method of taking the racket up towards the corner of the back fence and then going on edge into the racket drop a good way to correct a waiter serve? Maybe so. It's always good to experiment on the serve with different styles, and sometimes problems can be solved by adapting a certain style. Now here come the quirky technical elements on the Mensik serve. So when it comes to the toss, there are three different ways for your arm to go up towards the release. You can have your toss arm go up parallel to the baseline. You can have it go up diagonally into the court, or you can have it go up straight forward. The most used toss arm style on both the WTA and the ATP Tour is the diagonal toss arm technique. The second most used style is the parallel toss arm technique, and the least used style is the forward toss arm technique. Now, some players that use this style are more commonly found on the WTA Tour. The ATP Tour, a player that you might remember, Robin Söderling, had a forward toss arm technique. So this is definitely not a wrong way to toss the ball, because if you look at the Mensik toss mechanics, they are extremely clean. He keeps his arm straight, he has a perfect release, and he has a very consistent toss. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with his toss. However, certain things are going to be impossible to do when you utilize a forward toss arm technique. So some players will coil early in their service motion. Just remember Pete Sampras or John McEnroe, they have an early coil. So when players have an early coil, they have to toss the ball parallel to the baseline. If you try to coil early and toss the ball in here, this would be impossible to execute from a biomechanical standpoint. As you coil early, that left side of your body turns with the right side. So while the forward toss arm technique is not wrong, there are some limitations that you're going to find in the loading position. So if your toss arm is traveling forward upon the release and then you get into your tilt with your arm still in that same direction, you're going to have limitations how far you can coil. So the minimal amount of coil is having the elbow in that trophy phase or trophy position to be aligned with your torso. This is the minimal amount that you need. Now, when the elbow goes slightly behind the body, this is adequate. Now, an optimal coil is a position where the elbow is way outside the body, which is usually accompanied with more of a turn of the upper body as well, where the chest is actually pointing backwards. Now, very rarely you're going to see players with an extreme coil where the chest is pointing directly to the back fence, a la John McEnroe. So there is a range of how much coiling there is on a serve. And because Mensik has a forward toss arm technique, his coil is adequate, but it's not optimal. And now you're thinking, hey Nick, could he get more MPH if he coiled more? Not necessarily. This is a style that he used from day one. And it is possible that if he tried to coil more, he would actually get less power. The serve is very complex and there are many moving parts. And coiling a lot is not a fundamental element of the serve, it's a stylistic element. And that's why I call this amount of coil that Mensik has an adequate amount of coil. Because what is the advantage of a coil? You're going to get more rotation into the contact. So of course, when you're extremely turned like John McEnroe, you're going to get a lot of rotation into the contact. If you're minimally coiled up with your chest towards the side fence and your elbow in line with the body, something that you see on the ATP Tour, but you see it a lot on WTA Tour, you still get quite a lot of range of motion regarding the rotation into the contact. And of course, if you do it like Mensik does it and your elbow is slightly behind the body, you're going to get even a tad more rotation. So this is an adequate amount and it's still going to allow you to serve with a tremendous amount of power. Now what happens with a lot of players, especially the ones that can't naturally execute a serve with a large amount of coiling, is that end up not rotating all the way. They end up making contact behind it. They get all kinds of problems on the serve, such as an accidental slice. So if you are trying to get more power by coiling more, you have to do it so that it suits you, because every serve is going to be different regarding the amount of coil that it requires. But remember that you need an adequate amount of coil, and that is to about right here. Now when Mensik unloads on the serve, he's very athletic, a very talented player, and he's serving incredibly fast. And his height for sure helps him getting the desired angles on the other side. And on the ATP website, he's listed as 6'4", but I've heard that he's actually taller. He might have grown. But one other interesting thing about the Mensik serve is that the back foot is quite far away from the front foot when he's initially set up, and he pulls that back foot up either to the outside or right behind the front foot. So his body slightly shifts to the right. So when you look at his toss, it appears that he's throwing the ball at 1 o'clock, but because the body slightly shifts to the right, he's actually making contact more towards 12. So despite the fact that he has a forward toss arm technique, I do like the Mensik toss, and it is definitely not easy to read where he's going with the serve based on the toss. I'm going to dedicate an entire video on toss disguise. Now, Mensik's rhythm, it's not a super quick rhythm, but it's also not a slow rhythm. It's somewhere in between. And for that reason, the toss height is the same. It's not very low, so it's not hitting the ball when it's dropping from the apex, just a tad, like for example, Nick Kyrgios, but he's also not throwing the ball very high, something that you see very commonly on a WTA Tour. He is somewhere in the middle, and his toss height perfectly matches the rhythm on his serve. On the second serve, Mensik has a true kick serve. And the discrepancy in speed between the first serve and the second serve is huge. This is not necessarily a problem. Now, if you compare the Mensik serve to the Pericard serve, the discrepancy in speed on their second serves is huge. But you have to understand that, first of all, he hits a true kick serve, and even though that serve might be going between 90 and 95 miles an hour, it is still going to be very lively, and there's only so much that players can do with such a serve. Now, he's also able to slice the second serve and go a little bit faster, but generally, he likes to kick the second serve. And so for that reason, the second serve is going to be a lot slower than the first serve, not because he has a bad second serve, but because he hits a true kick serve. Because of the biomechanical differences between a flat slice and a kick serve, the slowest serve in tennis that we have is a true kick serve. And this is an important lesson to learn from Mensik, that you can be a great server and still have a discrepancy that's quite large between your first serve and the second serve. Now, this is only okay if you indeed have a kick serve as your second serve. If you have a flat serve as your second serve or a slice serve, and that's a lot slower than your first serve, now you're in big trouble. Because again, the big advantage of a kick serve is that it's very lively and it's going to be bouncing very differently from the other two serves, possibly away from the player and a tad higher. And for that reason, it doesn't necessarily have to be that fast to be effective. So for you guys, it's very important that you develop a true kick serve. And I want you to check out some of the other videos that I've done on the kick serve on the Intuitive Tennis YouTube channel. And last but not least, what I love about Mensik is that he slices his first serve a lot, especially when he's serving to the deuce side. This is something that I, for some reason, not see that often at the top level. I'm seeing it from Draper, for example, who's a lefty, but unfortunately, I'm not seeing it that much from Shelton. The lefties have a huge advantage on the slice serve, something that I talked about in this video right here. But the great thing about Mensik and what makes it very unpredictable when you're returning against him is the fact that he can go very hard and flat, and he can also slice his serve to all corners. I've seen him slice the serve out wide, I've seen him slice it down the tee, I've seen him slice when he's serving to the ad side. So a very versatile server, a very consistent server, not a guy that's going to give a lot of double faults, and is definitely a guy that can hold serve against anyone on the planet. And when he holds serve, he does it rather quickly.